Brad Lomax. Well, first of all, finding a phone number for Brad was almost impossible. But I happened to be driving through Hewitt, and he was walking his dog, so I stopped and said, "Give me your phone number." And so we asked him to speak, and the next thing you know, we have this. So tonight, Brad Lomax, whom you all probably know, and Bill Strieber, who you probably don't know, are going to talk about raising Texas oysters, and we'll go from there. Your turn.
Thank you.
Use the handheld.
I haven't had a woman stick her hand down my shirt so long.
Here we go. Or you want to just try this one?
Been hours.
Does that work? Right there, is that okay? Keep your expectations low. That's the secret to a good talk. So we have a small nonprofit called the Texas Surf Conservancy now, and it is the mission of that nonprofit is to promote oyster mariculture in the state of Texas and other environmental shellfish related causes. And so I've got some introductions I want to make. Cassie Champion, sitting right here at the end, is our executive director, does an amazing job, raises a lot of money for us and helps keep our programs going. Anna, come out here. Come here. This Anna Swanson works for the Surf Conservancy. She also works for Texas A&M AgriLife at their shellfish hatchery in Flower Bluff. She is a marine biologist and a science major and an oyster farmer. She worked with me on the oyster farmers. She called me grandpa one time too many and I got rid of her. Shelby Miskell. Shelby, everybody wait. Shelby is our education director, and I do all these introductions because we're doing really cool stuff, and Shelby is our educator. I'm most proud of the fact that she's a walk-on starter for Texas A&M women's basketball, and
many years ago.
But Shelby, we teach the science of oysters to grade school classes, and how many students now?
2,787.
2,787 students taught, and it's a very cool program, and Shelby does a lot. And then last, but where's Jacqueline? There's Jackie. Jackie Flores. Jackie Flores works for the Surf Conservancy. She is our Oyster Policy Fellow. She actually offices in Todd Hunter's office in Austin. So, you know, we all think Todd Hunter is the man, but nothing gets to Todd regarding oysters and the environment without going through the Jackie. And she does a great job. So I'll introduce Bill and Amelia here in a second, but I'm going to give you these are statistics from this afternoon. As of this afternoon, we have 19 total oyster farms in the state of Texas, covering about 152 acres of Texas bays. In 2025, we sold 5 million, we being collectively as an industry, we sold 5,162,097 oysters, valued at $3,286,000, 276. I'm nervous with Al Jones in the room. Damn it, my numbers are never right. We're in 114 restaurants and 21 distributors. That may not sound like a lot, but I just promise you that 6 years ago, it was illegal to farm oysters in Texas. So we've gone from negative to this. And I promise you guys, this is the future of Texas oyster production. And the way we currently, dredging public reefs for oysters is the most destructive form of commercial fishing that there is. And it won't be around. The recreational people and the environmental folks will not allow that to continue. So that's my soapbox, and you'll hear a lot more about that. how do we go from 0 to 5 million? From the moment we opened our doors in 1983 at the Water Street Oyster Bar, we sold Texas dredged oysters. We specified Texas oysters, and we bought from Aransas Bay, Rockport area, all the way up to Galveston. That all changed in 2010. The BP oil spill wiped out, and this is not a political comment, this is not a comment on environmental oil and gas, this is the truth. It wiped out the Gulf Coast oyster business for 5 or 6 years. And so we have oyster in our name, and we had to go find oysters to sell in our restaurant. And where's Bob? There's Bob right there. I had to admit to Bob Buchanan, who's from Connecticut, that I didn't even know Connecticut had a damn coastline until I was buying oysters from them. And so for years, I mean, some of y'all remember, for years we had to source oysters pretty much everywhere around the East Coast because the Gulf was shut down. And so that, as a restaurateur, 5 or 6 years of scarcity, 5 or 6 years of rising prices, uneven prices, inconsistent supply. And so I'm complaining about this to our friends at Hart Research Institute, who I've gotten to know over the years since the shell recycling program. And in 2016, a man named Joe Fox out there, PhD, turned me on to an 8-minute video entitled Gospel of the Alabama Oyster. And it praise the Lord, Bob. Praise the Lord and patch the shucking knife. So it's still on YouTube. Go watch it. That 8 minutes really changed my life, and it featured really cool people. As you can tell, this industry seems to attract really cool people, and but it featured scientists, Auburn University, and really a farmer out there, a guy named Lane Zerlot, who was one of the pioneers in Alabama, and he has a oyster farm called Murder Point in Bayou La Batterie, made famous by Forrest Gump, Bayou La Batterie, Alabama. So I got on a plane, flew to Mobile, rented a car, and drove to Bayou La Batterie, and I met Lane. And Lane, very generous with his time, let me hang around there and ask thousands of dumb questions and take pictures and stuff on his farm. And I'm telling you guys, the yacht club members, and looking outside, it felt familiar. It's a big bay with a medium-sized city at the end. It's surrounded by marine industry and fishing industry and really nice people. And it was windy, warm, and humid. I felt right at home. But I felt like, man, we can do this. This is something that we can do. And can you hear me all right back there? Everything okay? All right. So I came back, and of course my question to Joe and the people at HRI is, why aren't we doing this? We should be doing this. Well, the answer to that is it was illegal. You could not farm oysters. You could not raise oysters privately at all in the state of Texas in 2019. And so Joe and I made an appointment with our good friend and fellow member, Todd Hunter, and we went and talked to Todd, and we told him, I told Todd basically the story that I just told you all. And we said, is there a way we can change this? And Todd in his wisdom said, let me think about this. And he said, come, let's visit in a week. Come back in a week. So we go back and we meet with Todd, and Todd says, I think you've got something here. Remember Seinfeld? I think you've got something here. I think you've got something here, and I'm willing to carry the legislation if you will commit to 3 things. And so the 3 conditions was that he said, Brad, you have to throw all common sense and logic out the window. Logic and common sense have no place in the Texas legislature. This is the truth. I would lie, but not to the yacht club membership. Second condition was you need to be the face of this. You two, me and Joe Fox, you are the face. Joe is a state employee and can't lobby for legislation, but he can testify as an expert. And so you need to plan to spend a lot of time in Austin. You're going to meet a lot of people. You're going to tell the story to more people than you probably know in your life. So we agreed to that. And then I don't know, some of y'all probably know Todd's chief of staff is Angie Flores Granado, great lady. He said, well, the other condition is you have to do everything that Angie Flores Granado tells you to do without fail. Wear closed-toed shoes, get a haircut, put on a tie, all sorts of stuff that you have to do. So we said, sure. In February of 2019, I can't even remember, Jackie, what legislative session that was, but February 2019, Todd filed HB 1300, which was to permit oyster farming in the state of Texas, and we embarked on that adventure. And we talked to lots and lots of people and testified before committees and did all that stuff. And I'm proud to tell you, and this is a lot. I mean, a lot of grassroots help with this, but you know, Todd's the man up there, and that bill passed both houses of the legislature with 1 dissenting vote, which is, you know, first time legislature, first time at bat in that arena, and getting it with the guy. I can't remember the name of the guy who voted against us, but Todd tells me he's no longer in the legislature, and he will never be able to buy windstorm insurance as long as he lives in the state of Texas. So Governor Abbott signed that bill into law on my wife's birthday, Liz's birthday, May 27th, 2019. And then we had a year to put the rules and regulations together on how to run this new industry. 5 agencies plus a federal agency regulate raw shellfish in the state of Texas. You can imagine, thanks to Todd, I had a seat at the table. Joe Fox had a seat at that table, and we got the rules and everything set in place. The initial rules, and you know, there's a brand new industry, and a lot of people scared of what's going to happen in the water with new oysters, and a very cautious approach. But we got that put together. It became legal in September of 2020, and I worked really hard to get the very first oyster farming permit ever issued in the state of Texas. And I was real proud to get that, and I regretted it almost immediately. Because it kicked my tail, and I will. It's amazing. It's an amazing business, and these people right here are very successful at it. My story and why I'm no longer an oyster farmer is for another daytime drama that we'll get into at some point. But I did it. I farmed. And I know what it takes. I know what these guys do every day, and I pulled those cages out of water and I saw, where's Anna? Anna was there, was very supportive. Every morning she'd say, "You don't look like you're going to make it today, Grandpa." But I know what it takes. So I have the experience of selling them, buying them from distributors, growing them, and then talking to groups like you all so that we can help grow this industry. And so I guess where we are now, what I want to tell you before I kick it over to Bill is we got 30 million Texans to educate about this product. And I'm going to tell you that this is restorative mariculture. What we do, what Bill and Amelia do at their farm, helps restore Texas bays. It doesn't take anything from the bottom. The oysters are still out there filtering 50 gallons of water a day per adult oyster. They're making babies if they're in most cases, and it's restorative mariculture. So we have a delicious, nutritious protein that we can grow and improve our environment at the same time in a world of 8 billion people. I'm just telling you, there's not many situations like that. And so I tell you what my mission is now. Governor Abbott believes in what we're doing, and so much so that there was legislation passed that he signed that formed a governor's mariculture advisory committee. I'm blessed enough to have been named chair of that, and we are charged with growing this industry. And it starts here with a bunch. This is the most influential group that we've talked to, or that I've talked to. I mean, you guys know what the drill is. Marcus Fiji back there, he's a board member of the Texas Surf Conservancy. Marcus talks to a lot of people in a lot of environments, and it's just amazing to me. I was in Whole Foods Austin last week, and I went up and I asked the guy at the counter, and I said, "Do you have any Texas farm raised oysters?" This is in Austin. This is where everybody's cool and hip and knows everything and is better than us. I'm not resentful. And this guy said, "No, they don't farm oysters in Texas." All that sweat, and honestly, I looked at him. He was cutting fish at the time, and he had giant forearms and tattoos, and I said, "You're right, sir, and let's hope they get their act together soon." So anyway, that's where we are. We're selling 4 varieties at the Water Street Oyster Bar, and I will tell you the most popular of which is Clearwater Gardens, but they all compete. And there is a myth that exists in people's mind that East Coast oysters are better than the Texas, and I'll let you decide for yourself tonight when Bill takes over. But cool people. Bill Strieber is an entrepreneur. He's a tech guy. He's owned his own business. He's Port Aransas native, and is really. I covet the job he's doing with his oysters out there. Really well done, great oysters. Amelia is right there, and Amelia is great supporter, smart, educator, and their son is got smart and got in the restaurant business. Is a chef in San Diego, and their daughter is the film fellow, right, in Hannah in Todd Hunter's office. So cool people all the way across doing a great job. And so right now we're going to start handing out oysters, and they're in a special order of
Want me to tell you what it is?
yeah, tell us what they are, Shelby.
All right, everyone. So, on your top top left side, you're gonna have the PEI. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. The top left, you're gonna have the PEI. The top right, you will have the Texas Clearwater Oyster Gardens, and the bottom, you will have our Gulf oysters that are gonna be our dredged oysters.
So what's PEI?
Prince Edward Island, Canada.
Yeah, of course, beer.
Of course.
Canadian oysters.
Sorry.
So, Bill, how did I do? 22
You
minutes.
took all the time.
Pickles.
Go over which is farm raised again.
So the ones that are at the top that are the smallest ones are the ones from Canada, the PEI ones. The biggest ones are your dredged ones, and the medium ones are the Texas Clearwater oysters.
Talk all night.
So I'm gonna skip ahead real quick.
I'll have to get up there in a minute. Kenton McDonald. Yeah.
So somebody mentioned on your table there's a oyster tasting wheel, and it's oyster tasting wheel, and it's been produced by what's called the Oyster Guild. And so farming oysters is very much like raising wines. The oysters take the flavor of the water they're in, and so there are actually training programs to be an oyster sommelier, just like a wine sommelier. So the three oysters that you have, these are the tags from them. Whenever you go to a restaurant and you want to know about the oysters, you ask for a tag.
Can I tell everybody to listen up?
Sure. They've got oysters in front of them, they're excited.
Get their attention.
So when you go to a restaurant, an oyster restaurant, you want to know about the oysters, you can ask for the tag. And that's the chain of custody that shows where they're from, when they were harvested, how fresh they are, when they were chilled. If the restaurant doesn't show you those tags when you ask, order the fried shrimp. So, the Oyster Guild has a website and a book, The Essential Oyster, that was written by Rowan Jacobson. He literally wrote the book on oysters. There's just about every oyster on the planet and a description of it. And so I'm going to describe what the professionals have described these oysters as. So the dredged oyster, the big one, came out of Galveston Bay, and massive, mean, and muddy, spackled, gritty shells and fat, sloppy meats, one giant eye gazing back at you. The kind of thing that makes a Manhattanite run in fear. Most of these people are from New York, so they pride themselves on their oyster aficionado. The flavor of it was described by a professional as chewy blancmange, which is a cornstarch jello milk. I've never heard of it. So they weren't too fond on the Texas Gulf oyster. We get that a lot. That's what Brad was saying at the Whole Foods. So they don't do farmed oysters in Texas. Well, we see it from the other end. We'll bring our farmed oysters into a restaurant or into a place, and they're like, we don't do anything but East Coast oysters. So we'll try these. And they're like, man, these aren't from Texas. Yes, they are. Where are they from? Port Aransas. I don't believe you. So Texas has started producing world-class oysters. Rowan Jacobson, the guy who wrote the book on oysters, asked several of the farms around here to send our oysters up north to have an oyster tasting of it, very much like this. And they were blown away. I'm going to start from the beginning again. So I just wanted to show you all where we were with the oysters that you're sitting in front of you. So again, my name's Bill Strieber. My wife Amelia, she's the mother shucker. We started farming shortly after Brad did. He taught us a lot, and I will say Amelia and I owe a lot to Brad, very much. He's a testament of what one person can do when they decide something needs to change. He has changed the industry of not just the restaurant industry, but the oyster industry in Texas. We are now producing world-class oysters in Texas, and we get so much good feedback on that. Brad mentioned that first started in 2019. Amelia and I planted our first, after 2 years of regulatory permitting with every alphabet agency known to man. We planted our first oysters a little over 2 years ago, harvested them about 8 months later. The East Coast oysters, the small ones that you're seeing, they take 18 months to 2 years to grow in the cold water. When they get cold, they go dormant, they stop growing. Here in Texas, water never freezes, or it froze once for about 15 minutes at 3 in the morning last winter. The oysters have no problem with that. They've got lots of nutrients. They grow year round. We can grow our oysters in 6 to 8 months, and they're much, well, I'll leave it up to you guys. Almost 160 acres permitted. Oyster industry is $64 million a year in Texas, just in Texas. And we are slowly but surely changing the oyster market. Questions get asked all the time. What about eating oysters with a month without R in it? It's an old wives' tale. Back in the day when they used to sail or row their boats out to the oyster reefs and dredge them, and then take 2 hours in August to get back to the port, nobody wanted to eat those oysters. There are now R's in May, June, July, and August. It's called refrigeration. This is a very, very highly regulated industry. We have to do a cold chain of custody. Anytime we move an oyster, we have to document what we did with it. We take it out of the water, sort it by size, or to tumble it, and do the work that needs to be done with them. We have to document it. We got to know when we document when we put it back in the water. If we take them out of the water, they got to be in the water for 2 weeks to make sure that they're still healthy. So it's very, very highly regulated. Each week, I believe it is, there's 29 or 30 different oyster harvesting areas in Texas. The Texas Department of Health Services goes out and samples the water every week. If there's a particular pathogen that they're looking for, they'll shut down harvesting, or above a certain level, they'll shut down the harvesting and keep testing the water till that pathogen no longer shows up, and then they wait another 2 weeks for it to clear out. When you see the news where it says oyster harvesting was shut down in Galveston Bay or Tres Palacios Bay, it's because of water runoff from a river. All the farm runoff, all the city runoff. Oysters are filter feeders, so they will filter that out. And if there's not good stuff in the river water, they're going to not allow you to harvest the oysters. This is a picture of our farm in Aransas Bay. We have a 2-acre farm, if you're familiar where Mud Island is, on the south end of Mud Island. Aransas Bay, I don't have any way of proving it. I'm looking for help with that. There's no river influence into Aransas Bay. There's no industry in Aransas Bay, and we're right next to a Gulf Pass. So it's one of the cleanest areas in the nation. We're on the edge of about a 1,500-acre grass flat, and on an outgoing tide with predominant wind. That highly oxygenated, highly nutrient-rich water flows right over the top of our farm, and our oysters grow fast and they taste clean.
Where is Mud Island?
Harbor, if you're leaving Port Aransas, and Harbor Island is where the ferry lands across the channel. And then where the lighthouse is Harbor Island. And if you go north about 4 miles, 2 miles enters into Aransas Bay, another 2 We're on the other side of Mud Island in the middle of Aransas Bay, quite a bit away from Harbor Island. So this is an air shot. You can see that's 2 acres and our guys in a boat. That's what an oyster farm looks like. It's very small. It's 2 acres. So that 2 acres has 11, each acre has 11 rows, so there's 22 rows. Each row has 14 cages, and each cage has a compartment of 6 bags that holds the oysters. Full capacity, that'll do 750,000 to 1 million oysters a year on 2 acres. So the Brad mentioned it. Great thing about these farm-raised oysters. All the dredging from the natural reefs has taken its toll. There's, everything from too much fresh water from storms, erosion, over harvesting. 80 to 90% of the natural oyster reefs in Texas are gone, absolutely gone. And they're a keystone species. They filter water. They're the reasons why when there's a bunch of oysters, the water's actually clear. And so to take pressure off of the natural reefs, the natural resources, the farming has started to take the pressure off. Every oyster that's served in the United States that wasn't in the Gulf, Texas still allows dredging, Louisiana still allows dredging, I think Florida may to some extent, but every other state in the Union does not allow dredging anymore. They all have to be farmed. So any East Coast oyster or West Coast oyster is going to be farmed. Yes, ma'am.
Educate me. What does it mean, dredging?
So
Like deep into the channel.
yeah, so it's exact. They basically have a big steam shovel and they'll pull up to an oyster reef and dig all the oysters out of the mud.
Okay.
And
So
then-
that would destroy the.
Correct.
How come she only talks to you, not talk to me?
Ignore him. He's my husband.
Mary and I our anniversary's tomorrow. We'll be married 31 years. I take it y'all been married about the same time, so.
About 6 months. And 2 weeks.
So my follow-up is why was it illegal to have farming? Like,
So there's a lot. They've tried shrimp farming, they've tried redfish farming, and everyone is very scared of biosecurity measures. Make sure the shrimp farming introduced a lot of foreign species that had foreign pathogens that killed a bunch of our indigenous species. So they stepped very lightly and wanted to make sure that you didn't start bringing in oysters from the West Coast and farming them without some sort of regulatory oversight.
okay, thank you.
The sustainability. This is the cool thing. The farmed oysters. There's an organization called Sink Your Shucks here in town through Corpus Christi A&M and Sea Grant. Very much like a restaurant has a grease trap in the back that they recycle the grease. The oyster shells that are used in a restaurant are put in a bin behind it. This nonprofit group, Sink Your Shucks, and up in Houston, it's called the Galveston Bay Foundation, does the same thing. They go around to the restaurants and pick up these shells and take them out past the airport somewhere. I've never been there, but they lay them out and let them dry out. And then once or twice a year, 3 times a year, they have volunteers. There was one at Goose Island, an event at Goose Island with 175 people that showed up on their own time and got all these oyster shells, worked with the Parks and Wildlife Department. Parks and Wildlife Department said, we need a new oyster reef right here. And so all these people are standing in the middle of North Aransas Bay, daisy chaining these bags of oyster shells out, and they pile them up. There's billions and trillions of oyster larvae in the water looking for something to stick to. They love to stick to other shells. And so within a year, those bags of oysters are now a new oyster reef. So when you're eating farmed oysters, you're actually creating more habitat, not going and digging it up through dredging. So that's a huge plus for our industry. Yes, sir.
Is there something akin to genealogy associated with Texas oyster?
Good question.
Is there like the top of the pyramid, there's the mother oyster of all oysters?
No, all oysters from on the East Coast, from Prince Edward Island up in New Brunswick down to Brownsville. They're all the same species.
Oh,
So those 3 different looking oysters are the same species. They were just grown differently. And so it's along the same lines as when we're the southernmost farm in Texas. We're in southern Aransas Bay. There's 3 or 4 of them in North Aransas Bay. There's a couple in Mesquite Bay or Palacios up there. They all taste differently because, as I said earlier, it's very much like wine growing. You have a valley at a vineyard, and you have the same varietal grape. And on one side, it gets more sun and less moisture, and the other side gets more moisture and less sun. When you bottle those grapes, when you ferment those grapes, they're going to have a different flavor. The term for that is called terroir. It takes the flavor of, the terroir. Terroir takes the flavor of the terrain. Well, we've adopted it in the oyster industry from the marine environment. It takes the flavor of the marine environment, so it's terroir. I got it mixed up. Thank you. So, what it takes to grow these things. This is one of the oyster cages. That's Amelia. She's in there flipping cages and tying things. So yes, she actually gets out there and does work. I stay on the boat and take pictures. So when we purchase the baby oysters called spat from a hatchery or hatcheries, one of them being in Bayou La Batterie, as Brad mentioned. There's one in Palacios, and that's really the only one in the state. One just started, a small private one just started the other day. But we buy those by the hundreds of thousands, and they're about half the size of a pinky fingernail. And we'll put 150,000 in 2 of those cages. But as they grow, they fill up the bags that are in the cages, and so 1 cage becomes 2 cages, becomes 4 cages, becomes 8 cages. So we're out there making sure they have plenty of room. We can't get them packed in there; they won't have the water flow through. When we get them from the hatchery, they're singular. They dredge the oysters from a reef, they're all in clumps, and they got to break off the small ones because they can't keep the small ones, and they throw those back in the water. They die. They keep the big ones, but they're all clumped up. The ones that are farmed are singular, and so the restaurants, as Amelia always says, people eat with their eyes. They're grown at the top of the water, not on the bottom in the mud. The wave action tumbles them quite a bit. We flip those cages, when the oysters are above the water, we do once a week. We flip them up and they dry out, and then we flip them over and they grow for a week, and then we flip them back over and they dry out, and it keeps the shells clean. So if you look at the oysters, if you flip the oyster shells that you just ate over and look at the actual shells, you'll be able to tell which ones were farm raised and which ones were dug up off the bottom.
is that a best practices approach?
That's correct.
How did you learn about that?
So this methodology has been in place for half a century probably. East Coast, West Coast, overseas. Then it's several iterations of failures and successes. We didn't invent much. We stole a bunch. But one thing, and Brad will testify to this, all the equipment manufacturers up on the East Coast where they have nice big tall valleys and lots of wind block, they came down here thinking, oh, this is no problem. This is, open bay. Well, they're not used to the prevalent 20-mile-an-hour winds 99% of the time down here, and it tore the equipment up. So I learned a lot from Brad about what not to do, because they tried all kinds of things. That didn't work. And it's a small group of farmers that shared knowledge. And we would not be where we are if it weren't for Brad and his crew. I actually have a couple of his crew on board with me as well. So, any questions before I move on? Yes, sir.
Will desalination affect that?
I don't see it.
Good, that's enough.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if they were dumping it right on top of my farm, yeah. Fresh water hurts oysters more than saline. If they've been around for billions of years. So if they're not in the right environment, they go dormant. They clam up, for lack of a better word, and they can sit there for quite some time until the water gets better for them. And that's actually when we harvest them. And everybody will ask, how long does an oyster last after you harvest it? We've got a white tablecloth restaurant in San Antonio that we gave them samples, and I kept going back, sales 101, follow up, follow up, follow up. And after 3 weeks, he hadn't returned the call. I'm like, guess he didn't like my oysters. And finally, I got in touch with him, and he said, I'm still trying them. I'm like, trying them? You've had them 3 weeks. What do you mean you're trying my oysters? He's like, I give about a month. I taste them as they go along. I was like, you're going to eat an oyster that's a month out of the water? He says, yeah. They go dormant when they get cold, so if you keep them in the refrigerator, it says when you shuck them, if they have fluid in them, they're still alive. And so they're very, very hardy animals. And I still won't eat one that's a month old, though. I went to UT, got a degree in biology. Again, my name is Bill Strebers. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biological Science, so 3 levels of BS deep when you're talking here. So I always made fun of my Aggie friends for going to a school where you could get an animal husbandry degree. I always thought that was hilarious. And guess what we do now? We do animal husbandry every day. Part of it's we flipping and drying them. We have a big machine called a tumbler that's a long tube with different size holes in it that sorts them by size. And it also chips the edges so they will have a deeper cup. It makes them cup up. It exercises them. The muscle inside that holds the oyster shells together gets stronger. It becomes a much better oyster when you do the animal husbandry. Don't tell my Aggie friends. Again, I mentioned earlier the tags that go along. Whenever we pull the oysters out of the water, we got to make sure they're cold soon enough and they stay below 45 degrees until they get to the restaurant. The restaurant keeps them at 45 degrees until they're served to you. The tags that go along with those are required by the restaurant to be held for several. How long do they have to hold tags?
A year.
A year. So if somebody eats an oyster and says, I got sick from that oyster, the health department can go to the restaurant and interview, look at the tags they have. They don't have the tags, they're in trouble, which tells them where they got the oysters. They will go and inspect that whole chain of custody all the way back to the farm, back to the hatchery. Where did you get the seed? How did you treat your oysters? What were your animal husbandry practices? The whole situation from start to finish, they will make sure that everything was done right. It's a very highly regulated food source. So unless they haven't been handled properly, they're as good as anything you can eat. I mentioned that 750,000 to 1 million oysters in that 2 acres. The biological term is called fecundity. They produce a lot of offspring, and any animal that does that tends to lose quite a bit. So we were told to expect about a 15% attrition rate on the oysters. I think we're seeing a bit more than that, and we still don't know why. Some of them just don't make it. It's tragic. Rowan Jacobson. Yes, sir.
Is there a minimum size that you ship to a restaurant?
We can harvest when they reach 2.5 inches. We sort some restaurants like big oysters, some restaurants like smaller oysters. The nicer the restaurant, the smaller the oyster and the more expensive it's going to be. I think they were trained by these, and it kind of started the East Coast oysters. Take them 2 years to get to 2.5 inches. They're going to sell them as soon as they can, and so the marketing and smaller oysters are easy to shuck. They're easier to eat. The big ones, the big Gulf oysters that sometimes they're good for cooking. They're good for frying. Eating them raw, you can, but they're a mouthful. I'll just put it that way. Rowan Jacobson, the Essential Oyster author, he's a Beard Award-winning food critic. We sent those oysters up to New York, and he and his self-proclaimed group of oyster snobs, his words, not mine, had a lot of really good things to say. And this came about right when we were getting started, and that was the win in our sales, pardon the pun, at the yacht club. But so he says, if you can read Texas, read this up here. Texas, I know y'all can read. Texas farmed oysters can go toe-to-toe with any oysters in the country. Plump, meaty, beautifully balanced in sweetness and brine. They are an essential component of any well-curated oyster bar. And one of his colleagues, in so many words, said, we had this really cool dish, but it was made with the Prince Edward Island standard oysters that we're used to. It would have been so much better with a Texas oyster. And these are the New York oyster snobs. So when I say we're producing world-class oysters, that's not just me saying it. It's not just Brad saying it. These are the people that wrote the book on oysters, and they're blown away by it. So thank you, Brad, for getting this started again. You go to the white tablecloth restaurants, they have the chalkboard oysters, where they have the different names of oysters, mostly East Coast for the longest time. This is a picture from the first serving of the Texas chalkboard flight at Water Street Restaurant. This is about 1.5 years ago. This is actually before we actually produced oysters from our farm. But this was the first Texas oyster flight. And I would love to say our farm has exclusive rights on a restaurant sell, and they would only buy from our oysters. As a businessman, yeah, that would be great. But a restaurant needs to be able to serve a multitude of different oysters because they have different flavors. They come up and serve a flight of 3 or 4 of each of 5 different farms. People will have different flavor profiles they like. And that 1 dozen goes from, well, I like those. Well, I like those. Well, let's get another dozen of those, another dozen of those. So the restaurant actually gains from having a bunch of different oysters. So yeah, I'll put mine up again. I'm not scared of putting ours up against anybody else's oysters. I actually would like to see what we did all the time, multiple oysters, so people can see the difference in the oysters. And again, they're the same species, they just were grown differently. It is a superfood. So a serving of 6 oysters is what this USDA, Texas Parks and Wildlife, these are the nutrients that you get out of eating 6 oysters. It's got more zinc than any other food source known to man, naturally. I'm sure they can add zinc to whatever they want. But I mentioned before the oyster tasting wheel with the Oyster Guild. There's an organization that trains restaurant professionals and oyster aficionados on being an oyster sommelier. And if you just, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there is almost an infinite number of flavors and textures and nuanced flavors in that oyster wheel. But the big one, ours are briny. We don't have any fresh water in Aransas Bay. Some people like briny, some people don't. Ours have a briny forward and the minerality in the center, and they finish sweet, which people like, how did you get an oyster to become sweet? But, yeah, Brad taught me. So. But I started out when you have the oysters, the professional descriptions of the dredged Gulf oyster. The Fire Lakes is the name of the PEI, the Prince Edward Island Canadian oyster, the small one that was on your plate. I couldn't find a whole lot of descriptions out there, but I had 1 or 2 before I started this. It said it had a medium salinity with a bright, clean finish. That's not what I experienced. It was not briny, and it was how would you say, creamy. That's one of the proper terms. So people have different flavor, or they taste differently from different. Somebody may taste something different in that flavor wheel than the next person sitting next to them. So it's a very unique eating experience when you get to. It's like drinking wine. You know, you hear all these arcane descriptions of these nuanced flavor profiles. So there's a Cody Fitzpatrick chef that was here in Corpus for a while. Was a trained oyster sommelier from the Oyster Guild, and we asked him to give us a flavor profile of ours. And I mean, if that's not a crazy description of an oyster, I don't know. Earthy, mineral, sweet, full body, bold, seaweed, kombu-like. I don't know what kombu is. Still haven't found out. And so this is a description of our oyster. I still laugh every time I read it.
I agree.
Thank you.
Dr. Carl.
And so I got to give a plug. We're out of Port Aransas. Amelia and I met on the beach there in the mid 80s, and when the earth was still warm, and she pursued me heavily on the beach, and she finally caught me. But we live in Port Aransas, and that's where our business operates out of. We're partnered with a tour boat out of the deep sea headquarters, the Scarlet Lady. It's a big 45-foot catamaran with a top on it and a bar. And did I mention there's a bar on it? And the first Sunday of every month, we take tours out to the farm. We had one this last Sunday. And basically you get, me doing this song and dance out there, but you get wine that's paired with it, and you get to see the farm up close. So feel free to come on board. Any questions before I end my blathering? Yes, sir.
No, we live in Texas.
Yes, sir.
Why do you call this a farm and not a ranch?
He called his ranch, so that was already taken. So, and so we actually call ours Texas Oyster Clearwater Oyster Gardens. There's a negative connotation to farmed seafood. People relate that with the tilapia, and farmed fish is people like, no, thank you. The thing about farming oysters, aside, farmed fish, they have to feed them, they keep the water clean, all that. It's completely natural. We don't feed them, we don't fertilize them. They eat what's naturally given to them in the waters that flow by. Yes, sir.
Did it expand from 2 acres to larger?
Eventually, it took us almost 2 years just to fill up the 2 acres, planting and splitting and selling, and we harvest every week. So it's a year-round operation. We chose our site out of the southeast wind, but we are completely exposed to the north wind, and it's haunted us a couple of times. So, but slowly but surely, if I learned anything from business is just make sure your foot's on the ground before you take the next steps. Yes, sir.
How do you stake a claim in a bay? Do you have a lease there? How does that work?
It is almost exactly like an oil and gas lease. I've leased 2 acres from the General Land Office. I have exclusive rights to farm oysters on those 2 acres. When looking for a site, they won't allow you to put an oyster farm on top of existing seagrass, nor on top of existing oysters, nor on, if anybody's ever seen a GLO lease map, you can't put it in an oil, leased oil or gas lease. Even if it's not producing, they won't let you do that. And the idea was to get out of the wind, and where it's shallow, there's grass. Where it's shallow, there's oysters. Where there's no wind from one side to the other side, there's an oil lease. It's hard to find a spot. We compromised, and I think we did. We got very lucky. We've been blessed. We're on a very hard, clean sand bottom. A lot of the farms on the back side of the bays are in the silty mud. We've had one of the farmers, the wind came through, and there's the farm's held in place by 6-foot plate anchors, big screw anchors at the bottom of the bay. That 2 acres has 3.5 miles of rope holding everything in place. And the storm came through and it pulled our anchors out of the mud. All our cages went to the other side of the bay. They untangled them, got them back. The Coast Guard, private aids, navigation, you had pilings set up. I said, well, let's just time to the pilings until we figure out what to do. a norther came from the other way and pulled all her pilings out of the water. So when I think I've evolved from being an oyster farmer to a mechanic and a fixer-upper, because there's always something breaking. But I've got a good crew to keep everything going. So, yes,
Can you
sir.
fish over an oyster farm?
Great question. Being that when we set up, it was nothing but a hard sand bottom, no grass, no oysters. It was basically barren bottom. And by creating all those floating reefs, it's a natural artificial reef. We've seen big triple tail trout and redfish. We see people fishing out there. It's been a while since I've been fishing because I have been dealing with oysters, but people fish around it and catch around it. Our guys were in the water flipping cages the other day, and about a 4.5-foot shark swam by. The older guys are like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" And the two other guys are on top of the cages going, "Get me out of here!" But it's created its own ecosystem. So that's another ecological benefit to oyster farming as well. Yes, ma'am.
How long does it take for you to get profitable?
Still working on it.
Yeah. We are cash flow positive-ish. But there's still some, good thing it's a crop. So the USDA, Farm Services Administration, have lots of helpful programs that allowed us to get started. Crop insurance, things like that. But all I say, I'm still very bullish on this industry because the oyster reefs, they're gone. One of the dredgers. So I have a license. We have a license to farm our 2 acres, and that's pretty much in perpetuity unless I fail to pay the dues that are lease fees, or if I do something illegal. I can keep farming for, I think that it lasts 15 years, and then it's up for automatic renewal. Same thing with the dredgers. If you have a license to dredge oysters, they can't take that away from them, and they can sell to other people. So a lot of the dredgers that you see, the boats going around digging up those oyster reefs, are from Florida. So they sold their licenses to people in Florida, and so the Florida people come over here, dredge our natural reefs, and send them back to Florida for consumption there. Last year, with the help of a nonprofit out of Houston, the Parks and Wildlife and Coastal Conservation Association, they went to all the oyster dredgers who were digging up the reefs and said, one-time offer, $30,000 to forego your oyster dredging license. 21% of the dredgers in Texas gave up their license. I've never been in an industry before where 21% of my low cost, high profit, well, maybe not such high profit, low cost competitors exited the market. And they're going to do that again this year, I'm pretty sure. So, and on the other end of the spectrum, when people are buying oysters, our son's a chef out in California, and they bring in East Coast oysters, and at his restaurant in Encinitas, they're selling one East Coast oyster for $5. So better go to Water Street tonight because he just raised his prices. It takes about 3 years for an oyster to grow a pearl, and so we get them out of the water in 5 to 8 months. So yeah, I've thought about just leaving a cage in the water for a couple of years, see what happens, but that's a step over the horizon for us. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Are these guys fantastic? Wow. Thank you very much, you two.
Yeah, buddy.
These guys are really a hard act to follow, aren't they? So would you rather have them come back in July?
No.
Or would you rather have John Byron with the Oasis River Authority talk about the Harbor Island deal again? You have no choice. He's coming back. He's our next speaker, and we look forward to having a big turnout. We hope you enjoyed the evening.
July 14th.
July 14th is the next speaker's event. Enjoy yourself tonight. Thank you very much.